Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. I am Nur Anaswa binti Muhammad Sino. Today we will present about the climate change. Do you know about climate change? A change in average weather conditions such as those related to temperature, humidity, rainfall, cloudiness and wind patterns, as well as variation in their frequency or intensity is referred to as climate change. Throughout humanity history, Earth climate has altered in cycle that last for incredibly long times. Instead, human activity and global warming are the primary causes of this problem. Global warming refers to specifically to any changes in the global average surface temperature. Global warming is the one type of climate change and it drives other changes in the climate such as the rainfall patterns and the frequency and distributions of weather events. The impacts of climate change on people and nature are increasingly apparent. Unpredicted flooding, heat wave and wildfire have caused billions in damage. Habitats are undergoing rapid shift in response to changing temperature and precipitation patterns. Extreme weather conditions, increasing sea level, shifting wildlife, population and habitat as well as a number of other effects are all a result of climate change.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Alia. I will present the sources of climate change. So, the sources of climate change are divided into two categories, natural sources and human sources. First of all, I will explain the first category, natural sources. Climate database show that global warming since the beginning of the industrial solution is occurring far more quickly than in the past. Volcanic eruptions, variations in solar radiations, and tectonic upheavals have all been observed to affect planetary warming and cooling trends during the duration of Earth life. Second category, human sources. Unrestricted fossil fuel use has greatly increased the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases, most notably carbon dioxide, over the past 150 years. At this time, the atmosphere's concentration of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide is at its greatest level in 800,000 years. Our methods for producing electricity, heat and transportation power, as well as our built environment, industry, interactions with the land, and consumption habits are the primary contributors to climate change. Transportation. The cars, trucks, ships, and aeroplanes that we use to move ourselves and our goods are the main contributors to global greenhouse gas emission. And vehicles are by far the greatest polluters on the road. Industry and manufacturing. One of the major sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the US, the industrial sector is responsible for 24% of all emissions. Most industrial emissions are caused by a small number of carbon-intensive products such as common chemicals, iron and steel, cement and concrete.
Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone. My name is Siti Fatima and now I will explain about the effects of climate change. The first effects of climate change is hotter temperature. Did you know in the past 30 years, temperature have increased and the warmest decade on record occurred from 2001 to 2010. Higher temperatures increases the likelihood that heat wave may occur more frequently and less longer. Heat waves are potentially fatal and can result in conditions like heat cramps and heat stroke. The effects on people and the environment will worsen as the temperature rises. Agriculture and food production are impacted by climate change in a variety of ways. Changes in agroecological conditions have a direct impact on food production, while income development and distribution have an indirect impact on food demand. Floods and droughts in particular can damage crops and lower output. In regions where drier summer summers are brought on by higher summer temperatures, managing droughts might prove difficult. Although increased carbon dioxide can promote plant growth, it also lowers the nutritional value of the majority of food groups. Most plant species, including wheat, soybeans, and rice, have low protein and critical mineral concentration as a result of rising atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Other than that, animals are impacted by heat stress in direct and indirect ways. Heat stress over time can lower fertility, decrease meat supply, and make people more susceptible to illness. In addition, droughts might put pasture and feed suppliers at danger. Climate change also affects on fisheries. Climate change has been connected to several outbreaks of marine disease. The temperature and the influx and outflow of diseases affect several stages of the life cycle of aquatic animals.
Lastly, the effects of climate change is flooding. Climate change has detectably altered a number of the water-related factors that cause floods, such as rainfall and snowmelt. Extreme rainfall is influenced by changes in weather patterns and more water in the atmosphere. In addition, warm rains cause faster and frequently earlier melting, while hotter temperature can cause more rain on snow occurrence in locations where seasonal snowmelt plays a substantial part in yearly runoff. In other words, while climate change may not directly cause floods, it certainly exacerbates many of the causes that do.
Hi, my name is Husna. So today I will present about the prevention methods of climate change. Carbon emissions are caused due to burning of fossil fuel that produce carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. These gases are known as greenhouse gases, which cause climate change. Therefore, to reduce the carbon emission in the atmosphere, we should reduce energy consumption by the use of renewable energy like wind energy, solar energy, and hydroelectric energy. Wind turbines convert energy from the wind into electricity to power electrical equipment. Secondly, solar energy, which comes from the sun. Specifically, panels harness energy from the sun and convert it into electricity in order to power homes and businesses. Lastly, hydropower, which uses the natural free flow of moving water to generate electricity. The second prevention method is 3Rs program: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Waste is frequently a byproduct of human activity that cannot be avoided, which occurs in the place we live, learn, workplace, and factories. How we choose to manage that waste has an impact on the people, plants, and animals that rely on the air, water, and land. First and foremost, we need to reduce the quantity of waste we produce. Next, we must reuse or repurpose goods rather than buy new ones. We can find places like recycling stations and containers for cans, plastic, paper, or organic waste near where we live. They each have specific colors to make it easier to identify. By using them, we can avoid contaminating nature, the rivers, and the seas. For the third prevention method is planting trees. The importance of trees in regulating the temperature is becoming more widely recognized as the world works to halt climate change. Trees are able to absorb carbon dioxide in the atmosphere through photosynthesis and store large amounts of carbon without the use of costly machinery. The natural carbon sinks are trees because they absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as they grow. The amount of carbon stored in a tree is dependent on its size. As a result, the larger the tree, the more carbon it can store. Some of the biggest carbon sinks are forests, like the Amazon rainforest.
Hi, my name is Intan Fatiha and today I will continue the presentation for regulation and guideline, which is in Malaysian and international. We go first with international regulation, which is the UK Climate Change Act 2008. In 2008, the world leader of the United Kingdom enacted the Domestic Climate and Ambition to change the regulation. UK approved climate change in 2008 as a basic guideline for dealing with climate change. This act remains a highly respected act despite almost reaching a near 1 decade. In these efforts, the UK is reducing emission of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that pose a risk to climate change. In addition, this act also established a framework to meet the requirement and further commitment to address climate change. The UK's act provides a framework to achieve the goals of reducing greenhouse gas emission over a long-term period. This step is emphasized in an effort to adapt to the effect of climate change that can occur at any time. Therefore, the main pillars of these acts are: firstly, set a statutory long-term target of 2050, which is carbon budget target for 5 years. Secondly, establish a climate change committee, which is an advisory and supervisory body. Thirdly, provide reporting requirements based on mandatory reporting to Parliament. 4. Drive the framework in action to adapt to climate change. So, we can see that Climate Change Act works through these acts as plans target has been compiled by the UK government, which is to set targets to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 2050. The Climate Change Committee (CCC) has been established so that these primary targets are successfully implemented based on evidence and are independently assessed. The risks and opportunities from climate change must be assessed by the government as mentioned in the Act. The Climate Change Committees play an important role in advising on the risks on climate change and assessing what the best deal to adapt with it. The government has set a carbon budget in this Climate Change Act, where this act as a stepping stone towards achieving the 2050 targets. This carbon budget is a limit on the amount of greenhouse gases released over 5-year periods in the UK. The budget is designed to be an effective measure to achieve the UK's long-term climate change objective and should be set at least 12 years in advance. In these efforts, the Climate Change Committee advise on the level of each carbon budget, and when the setting of this carbon budget is successful, the government is responsible for providing policies in the Climate Change Act so that the budget can be met. This act has shown a very excellent performance. Legislation has spurred action including setting 5 carbon budgets that collectively cover within 2008 until 2032. Regular reporting to Parliament has been enhanced and the Independent Committee on Climate Change is highly regarded. Next, we go to the National Policy of Climate Change. The national policy is designed as a basic to mobilize and guide government agencies, top groups, industries, communities, and other stakeholders in an effort to address the challenge of climate change in an integrated and holistic manner. The government realized that climate change has profound effects on all levels, sectors, stakeholders, and the public. Therefore, the implementation can be successful through collaboration based on existing indigenous and scientific knowledge. This will ensure that resilient climate can be maintained by meeting the country's aspiration for better future sustainability. Malaysia has the national policy on climate change that function to ensure climate resilient development to meet national aspiration for sustainable and robust development. There are 5 principles to set the country's direction in responding to the challenge of climate change. The first principle is development on sustainable path, which is national aspirations are designed to meet sustainable development. Second, conservation of the environment and natural resources. The implementation of programs that can strengthen climate change in the conservation and sustainable use of nature. Thirdly, coordinated implementation. Development and climate change programs are being combined in stage. 4. Effective participation. The exchange of ideas in the participation of authorities enhance effective climate implementation. And lastly, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. The involvement of common principles at the international level on climate change is priorities despite different responsibilities but having the same goal.
Now, I will present about case study related to climate change. Firstly, climate change in Barcelona, Spain. The problem posed by climate change for Barcelona include an increase in temperature, decrease in precipitation, and increase in extreme occurrence like droughts and heat wave. Barcelona's dense population can make the heat island effect worse. Barcelona is sensitive to certain climate change effects that have an impact on the entire Mediterranean region. These effects of climate change include diminutions, beaches owing to the sea level rise and drop, as well as increased flooding due to erratic and heavy rain, rising temperature and heat wave, which are likely to have an impact on people's health. Barcelona is a heavily populated city that is dealing with the growing number of human issues. The most frequent climate change related concerns in Barcelona include flooding, increasing sea levels, and extremely high temperature made worse by the urban heat island effect. Additionally, Barcelona also has socio-economic difficulties such as food insecurities, poor air quality, and environmental injustice brought on by climatic issues.
India experienced almost one extreme weather event per day in the first 9 months of 2022. The Himalayan state of Himachal Pradesh has experienced the greatest number of fatalities, with 359. The central Indian state of Madhya Pradesh is the worst affected in terms of frequency, with an episode occurring every 2 days. Based on the record, over 500 people were killed and 1.8 million were forced to flee South India due to flood in November and December of 2015. According to aid organizations like the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, floods are only one of the threats. In India, extreme heat waves have grown commonplace, resulting in thousands of fatalities each of the past 2 summers. Crop loss from the drought has led to famine and spike in the farmer suicides. Hot weather nations like India feel the limits of habitability being pushed as global temperature continue to increase.
Now I will present about some areas that have cases related to climate change. The cases is climate change and heat wave in the Midwest. Over the past few decades, the average yearly temperature in the Midwest has increased, as shown by events that took place in the 1980 and 1990. Population in the Midwest are particularly at greater risk for disease and mortality during heat wave. A heat wave in July 1980 increased mortality by 57% in St. Louis and by 64% in Kansas City. Perhaps the most well-known was the 1995 Chicago heat wave, which is thought to have contributed to an additional 966 deaths. A similar size heat wave in 1999 killed 119 people in Chicago.
The region Arctic is now more affected by climate change rather than many other parts of the world. Arctic animals also has host many microbial agents which can cause zoonotic infectious disease such as hydrophobia or rabies. These birds and mammals are host to a variety of pathogenic organisms capable of causing infectious disease in humans. The spread of this infection will probably follow the northward migration of corresponding animal or bird population. Consequently, more people are likely to be bitten and potentially exposed to pathogenic carriers by these insects and fleas.
In conclusion, climate change is real. The human activity is substantially to blame. If we do nothing, its effects are already been seen and will only get worse in the next decades. The escalating rate of global warming brought on by carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions caused by human activity has resulted in climate change and environmental degradations, which in turn has created significant issue for disease and human health. Due to changes in the weather, several diseases that were previously unknown climate zones are now spreading there. Climate change is the most significant problem facing in the world. Global warming is increasing day by day. If we cannot prevent it as soon as possible, our world will face undesirable consequences. Government, non-profit organizations and companies also have the responsibility to implement and contribute to these issues. Putting it in the nutshell, we must participate and try to limit climate change and other effects of global warming. This planet would be a safer place to live in if everyone together took action and attempt to stop the majority of the climatic changes that are taking place today.